No one gets married with a plan to separate from their spouse, yet close to 50% of marriages end in divorce. Most people going through separation desire a respectful and fair process for themselves, the children and their partner, but knowing how to create this kind of outcome means finding the right support at the optimum time for your needs. Welcome to the Separation Guide podcast. I'm your host, Sabina Read. I'm a psychologist, media commentator, podcast host, and life Sherpa, and my passion is to create moments of connection, hope, freedom, and joy while normalising the whole gamut of emotions that exist in all of us. What I know for sure is that we all share more in common than we do differences. And when we find common ground with others, it helps us to navigate even the toughest of days. Together with our online platform, theseparationguide.com.au, this podcast is your go-to resource for all things separation and divorce. Our aim is to walk alongside you to help remove some of the cost, conflict and confusion for people navigating the end of a marriage. Today on the podcast, we are joined by Bev Berelowitz, a relationship breakup and divorce coach from Flourish Divorce Coaching. Bev is an accredited divorce coach with over 30 years of experience in social work in both the public and private sectors. She specialises in helping men and women navigate the challenges that arise at any stage of separation. Having experienced her own divorce over 17 years ago, Bev was inspired to support others on their separation journeys. She understands the importance of sharing one's unique story and being heard while dealing with the complexities of a breakup. Now, many people have thought about what it would be like to leave a marriage, but the confusion, cost and fear can leave us paralysed. We wonder whether the gains will offset the losses, we fear the unknown, we worry about the opinions of others, and we're often concerned about the impact of our choices on people we love, including children, family and friends. It's understandably commonplace to question whether we have overturned all stones needed to know whether leaving is a reactionary step or actually the next best course of action to truly honour our needs. If you've thought about separating but continue to quash your intuition, or if you've arrived at a stage of knowing but you don't know where to begin, then this conversation is for you. And if you know others who are contemplating separation but feeling stuck, then please share this important conversation with them too. Here's my chat with Bev. Bev, you're a separation and divorce coach, and you've also got your own experience of separation and divorce. Can you tell us a bit about when and why you realised it was time to leave the marriage? And also, what do you know now that you wish you'd known then?
For me, Sabina, I just knew it was something that was a gut feel, and I just knew I had to go. My marriage had done its time and it was no longer healthy for me. I tried everything that I could do. We had been for couple counselling. I tried different styles of communication. I just no longer felt emotionally safe in my marriage, and I didn't feel respected anymore. I felt that it was time for me to move on, and I felt a bit dismissed in my marriage, and the connection had gone, and that's when I knew it was time to move forward. You know, often people stay out of guilt, out of fear, out of just probably procrastination or not knowing what to do. I was ready and I knew, and I just trusted that gut feel, and I did what I needed to get out.
Thank you for sharing some of your own experience, because I think it helps ground the work that you obviously do with so many clients now for us to understand some of your experience. In some relationships, there's still the possibility of change and growth and transformation. What do you think the signs are of a relationship that can be repaired as opposed to one that is perhaps healthier to leave?
Well, obviously, if there is any abuse, whether it's physical or emotional, often that's beyond repair. But if people are still respectful of each other, want to be together, and their values are aligned, I think that's often a really good indication that the marriage can be worked upon. I think as soon as a person starts to feel diminished and they lose their sense of self, they lose their self-respect, they lose their self-esteem, I think that's often when the signs and the red flags are there that the marriage probably is going to be harder to salvage.
That makes a lot of sense, and yet we're all influenced by conscious and unconscious beliefs, those that came before us in our family of origin, societal expectations and norms. And I wonder what your thoughts are on how we can balance the fine line of being true to ourselves, tuning into our gut and your intuition, which is something you've mentioned you did, while also not being overly influenced by the expectations of others, whether that's family or, as I said, societal expectations. How do we balance those two forces?
Obviously, our cultural background has a hugely strong influence on the way we do life. There is often a very strong social expectation, almost glorifies staying in relationships. Society does fantasize about staying in relationships, and I do believe that to do what the norm, to go against the norm, it's really hard. It's important to reframe it, to reframe the decision when you do find yourself in that situation, because leaving an unhealthy marriage or marriage that no longer serves takes a lot of courage. If we can see it as an act of courage and not failure, we're really doing it for ourselves. I always say that this is not a dress rehearsal. If we are given an opportunity to try again and find happiness and empower ourselves in a different way, regardless of what we're brought up to believe, it's really important to do what we need to do as human beings. And everyone is different. There's no right and wrong. But there is a strong influence of what society dictates as normal.
Many of us are aware of relationship counselling and couples counselling, but divorce coaching's perhaps a newer process. So I'm curious about how you work with clients, and particularly how you navigate the fear of making a decision that they may worry they will regret.
I think as a coach, the idea of coaching is to facilitate your client extracting the information that comes through. So you aren't really making any decisions for them. You just offer options. I think that's probably the best way of putting it. And people obviously are encouraged to just see what resonates with them and to trust their gut when they do make their decision. Most people know what is right for them. They just have never really had an opportunity, or it's never been a facilitator conversation where the options are laid out on the table and they can say, that resonates, that feels right, that doesn't. And often if something doesn't, you keep digging deeper because it could be a fear blocking them. So as a coach, you train to work with what's given and to try and go a bit deeper to ensure that they get to the bottom of what's stopping them from making whatever decision they need to, whether it's to go or stay.
Do you ever work with couples in this process, or is it predominantly with individuals?
I work predominantly with individuals. I have worked with couples before, but that isn't my area of expertise. So I generally refer on to couple counselling. I do have some in my little toolbox who I generally tend to use, and I always say to my clients, I would never refer you to anyone who I personally wouldn't use myself. So, yes.
Leaving a relationship is rarely black and white, and you've made reference to fear, and fear has its place when we're embarking on the unknown, uncertainty, change, and what a future looks like that is different to the future we initially envisaged for ourselves. How often do you hear people continuing to express a feeling of love for the partner that they want to leave?
Not often. There definitely are situations where people just feel that they've fallen out of love with their partner, but there isn't really that sense of, I love that partner so much, I don't want to go, and they choose to leave. So usually, whatever the kind of love is, it's dwindled, it's no longer there, and that's what makes the person choose to leave, unless they've been in an unsafe relationship emotionally or physically. Then it is black and white. You do have people choosing to leave relationships because they feel that they're no longer bringing the best out of each other. And, that's quite a kind, gentle, mature way of choosing to exit a relationship, because you do love each other to a point where you want each other to live the best version of your life. And when you recognize that it can't be done with each other, that is really a magnificent way of ending a relationship. But it's very rare and it doesn't happen that often. Usually by the time people come for support, they're struggling, they're stuck, they need help because they're not quite sure which direction to go in. So usually people who are clear and they've come to that arrangement mutually don't generally tend to go for the support.
Because they've already made up their mind and maybe had a discussion, a transparent and honest discussion with each other. I want to play devil's advocate here. We know that over the course of a relationship, the so-called honeymoon period tends to ebb and flow. Passion, desire, sexual connection can all shift in the course of a long-term relationship. So how do you think we know the difference between those natural ebbs and flow of decades with one person as opposed to recognising that we're not going to bring out the best in each other, to use your phrase?
I think it's just an internal knowing. It's when the same issues are repeatedly coming up. For example, when a partner feels like they're walking on eggshells around the other, when a partner feels that being away from each other is actually more peaceful and manageable than being in each other's company, there are definite signs that are elicited to make a person know whether the relationship is worth staying in and saving, or whether it's time to get out, because it isn't a light decision. It's a really hard decision and it's life-changing. So I do say to my clients, first prize is to stay together if you can. Obviously, when you get to a point where you just realize that you can't do life together anymore and you will be happier and you start fantasizing about a life without each other, that's a very clear sign that it's time to possibly look at the alternative.
What else would be on that list? Because you've just mentioned 3 really potent indicators that the relationship may have run its course. What else would you add to that list?
Sometimes it's subtle, but sometimes it's really clear-cut. I think when trust has been broken, that's quite a clear indicator when you've tried to work on the relationship and you just can't, when a person's trust has been broken and they make promises and those promises are not fulfilled. So you don't even trust the new promises. I think when people grow apart, when the values are no longer aligned and you just feel that who is this person that you're with? They're not the person that you thought you had married or who you had married, or what have they become? And you just don't feel comfortable. There's a discomfort which no longer sits well, and one doesn't want to tolerate that discomfort. But it's when things are no longer worth tolerating and the resentment just sets in too deeply. When you've had enough and you just can't do this anymore. It becomes too exhausting.
Yeah, that's quite a long, detailed list. You mentioned something around the other person's not who I married, the other person's not who I wanted. But I wonder how often it's about how much I've changed as the partner, as the initiator.
Yeah, that too, absolutely. Something quite commonly witnessed in my practice is when women start to come into their own and they feel empowered and they feel that they're not being fulfilled in the relationship in a way that they're wanting to be, or they can no longer be the mother figure, the sexualized mother figure, or can no longer baby their partner. Those are the words they use and they express, and it's causing an anxiety where their body actually feels it, and constant ongoing trauma. There's a book that's been written called The Body Keeps the Score, and it starts to affect one physically. Mm-hmm. And when our body holds that trauma and that physicality, it starts leading to other issues like insomnia or incredible tension, anxiety, depression. And those are all signs that this relationship it has probably run its course and is no longer healthy.
Famously, Chris Martin and Gwyneth Paltrow were part of coining the phrase conscious uncoupling. What do you think a true conscious uncoupling would look like? What steps might it entail?
For me personally, it's all about communication. It's about transparency. It's about expressing your needs. It's about consideration, thinking about each other, thinking about yourself, as well as if there are children involved and it's appropriate to put those children first. It's about being conscious in your decision making, because every decision made has a consequence. And when we are conscious about what we do, we are also conscious about the potential risks and the positives which can come out of a conscious decision or a conscious action.
I wonder how much the developmental overlay plays into this. You talked about, you've seen a lot in your practice, women coming into their own sense of empowerment or change. And I know it's very common at milestones like retirement, menopause, empty nesting. These are what I would put under the banner of the developmental lens, because they're happening at certain points in the lifespan. How do we know when a relationship is rubbing up against itself because of these external developmental milestones, as opposed to what is actually happening between the couple? Or does it matter?
I think it does matter, because I think having personal insight and doing the work is really important. And if there are factors which have contributed to the breakdown of a relationship, if these are not addressed, they will just keep repeating themselves. So attachment styles, one's own parenting, one's own past traumas, one's upbringing, one's societal expectations, one's previous traumas and grief all play a role in how we act out in our relationships and what we bring to the table. And I think when these are not resolved, they absolutely do play a huge part. And it does matter, because before anyone moves forward and starts considering another relationship, it's really important to do your healing and to try and resolve some of those wounds which often stem from childhood.
Nearly always, I would say. And so often we choose, perhaps unconsciously, a partner to work through those traumas. That partner is almost the best person on the planet to trigger those parts of us that are unhealed or that we're working through ourselves. And again, how do we make sense of how much of this is the wounds that I'm carrying and the processes that I'm working through, as opposed to what's coming up for me in the presence of my partner?
That's a great question. And if I had to rewrite my script, and I think everyone's script, I would say before you enter a relationship, a long-term serious relationship, make sure you do the work on yourself and go for couple counseling. Go almost for premarital counseling to make sure that you're on the same page, that your values align, that you have parenting values, that you want to raise your children in the same way, because I think it's often that difference. And as you say, often we're attracted to probably someone who's going to be our teacher rather than someone we're going to do life well with and parent well with. That would be my wish and hope for everyone, to just do the work before they enter that long-term relationship.
And perhaps then the question becomes, are we better off with, because all relationships are growthful in some way.
Yeah.
Again, societal norms, at least in our culture, suggest that teacher relationship, that learning, that growth relationship needs to happen forever. I wonder if it's possible that we might do better sometimes with multiple teachers if we follow that train of thought.
That is a perspective, absolutely. And I think we do have multiple teachers from our friendships, and we can never get everything from one person. So I think, we also need to be clear of our expectations of that relationship. What are we expecting? Are they unrealistic? Knowing that friendships can give us what we need, and educationalists and our gym coach can give us what we need on a level, our yoga teacher can give us a spirituality. So just knowing, they say it takes a village to raise a child, and I think it takes a lot of teachers to have a good life.
Including four-leggeds as well, I would add to the list.
Absolutely. Unconditional love.
Yeah. And intimacy and touch that we get from animals that I think is often overlooked. But I've heard so many people over the years talk about how meaningful their pet is in their life.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And I suppose it teaches people to give as well and share and love as well as receive.
Yes, yeah. Beautiful. What do you think some of the biggest mistakes people make when separating? So let's sort of fast forward a little bit here that I'm now thinking, I'm getting closer to being clear that this is the step I want to take. What are some of the biggest mistakes that I might want to be aware of?
Yeah, I think rushing into anything is not helpful. So I think knowing your why, knowing why you are doing this, knowing your expectation from doing this. What does it look like? What is the landscape going to look like if you do make that decision? Because we need to look at whole of life. So we need to look at the impact that it will have on our lives, on our relationships, on our children, on our employment, on our housing, we need to consider our whole world and not rush into anything. So I would say get the advice you need, draw on the experts, speak to someone legal, someone financial, speak to a mortgage broker or a mediator, speak to a counselor, psychologist, a coach, make sure that you've got your breakup support team, that you are being supported in every way that you need to be. Make sure that the people that you talk to, you trust. Often people just have a need to talk and get it out, especially if they're angry. It's not always helpful. Sometimes it falls on the wrong ears and you don't know what people are bringing to that conversation from their own stuff and their own experiences. So just make sure you speak to a trusted person and know what you need to do. Don't rush into any decision making.
I'm going to give a shout out to the separation guide here because that's really a lot of what the separation guide is hoping and does offer, I believe, this triaging of this group, this support group, that it's often so hard to know who you even need support from, apart from, as you say, perhaps a close trusted friend, which is a good place to start. But also, as you say, they will share through their own lens of experience as opposed to impartial expertise. And one person can't have expertise in the financial and legal and parenting and relational and real estate, all of these lenses put together. So I like that, this idea of getting together a support group with their different inputs.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you also mentioned something around reframing the idea of divorce. And again, so many people believe that longevity is a metric of relational success, and so the end of it must spell failure. How else can you help people reframe their idea that the end of a relationship is not failure, but perhaps a transition and maybe a welcome one at that?
I think the most important thing, Sabina, is to own your story. Own what you've done and be proud. Be proud to say, you know what, I've chosen myself over and above this toxic relationship, or I'm choosing freedom. I'm choosing to give myself another chance to be happy. So, own that. See it as a form of growth, a form of comfort, not as a failure. Create that circle of support around you. So surround yourself with people who are going to enhance your life, who are going to understand what you're going through and support your decision, not criticize you. People who will actually understand why you're doing what you're doing. Also, I think a really important thing is to have self-compassion. We need to do what serves us and we need to listen to what we need, because at the end of the day, we do the best we can with the tools that we have, with the strength we have, with our levels of exhaustion. If you're parenting, it can be so tiring and often one doesn't even think straight at the time, like, what am I doing? And then the fear creeps in. I think it's just important to know that we all do the best we can with what we have at that moment and at every moment in time. Acknowledging that it takes courage to say no more. I'm out of here, and we can grieve at the same time as we can be courageous and brave. And just knowing that grieving and feeling that emotional pain is a very normal part of the separation process. It is a loss. It's a loss of the dreams. It's a loss of the future that we envisaged. So there's definitely a whole grieving process that goes with that. And just giving yourself permission to go through that grieving process is vital. We've got to go through it to get to the other side.
And of course, as we know, grief comes in waves. So if some of those grieving feelings arise, I guess for some people it may be easy to think, well, if I'm feeling this deep sense of loss, maybe I'm making a decision that's not right for me at this time, as opposed to just feeling the wave of grief and letting it roll over them until the next emotion comes, because they continue to come and go. We know all emotions do that. You're talking there about self-compassion, about putting your own needs on the table, and yet what do we do when we feel like perhaps my needs and my children's needs are at odds with one another?
So there's often that conflict of what we need to do in terms of where do we prioritize our needs above our children, because most mothers or parents put themselves first. However, I always remind people of the aeroplane story. Mothers, put your own oxygen mask on first. We can't be good parents if our tank is empty. So it's really important to fill ourselves up. What I mean by that is try and maintain the routines, keep exercising if you can, and make sure you have a regular massage, because often with the body holding the tension, I say to people, have you ever felt your neck just wants to totally freeze up? And they say, of course. So we need to release it. I offer people skills and techniques and some somatic strategies to get rid of some of that anxiety that the body holds on to. But I think it's just about being clear and really making sure that you do find time out. You do find time to look after yourself and do those things that make you feel good. Whatever that is, we're all different and we all get our pleasures from different sources, but it's the healthy pleasures that we need to focus on, because it's quite easy to say, I'm just going to have a bottle of wine tonight and I won't have to think about it. So we have to be aware that there are healthy pleasures and there are those that don't serve us. So it's about building a whole list of what we do to support us during this time, rather than add to the stress and the challenge and the negativity.
Yeah, it's wise advice. Let's fast forward to the separation process. How can I rebuild my post-separation identity? I'm used to living on Noah's Ark, where everyone's in a couple and we go to dinners together because we're a couple and they're a couple, and we're part of a family unit because that's what we signed up for. And now our post-separation identity looks very different. Our living conditions, our living scenario looks different. Our socialising looks different. How can we start to reframe this new post-separation identity?
That is a brilliant question, because that is so real. It is something people do often struggle with. And I think the most important thing is to actually go back to before you were in a relationship. What were the things? Revisit the things that you were passionate about. Revisit the things that you enjoyed doing. What were your hobbies? Who were the people you used to hang out with? And what excited you? Trying to revisit those, or maybe think about what are the things you always wanted to do in your marriage, but you couldn't for whatever reason, whether your partner restricted you or finances restricted you, whatever the reasons were. If you are sharing the children, the days that you don't have the kids, see that as an opportunity for you to actually do all those lovely things that you've always wanted to do, the pottery class, the art class, the Zumba class, whatever your interests or passions are. Think outside of now and think about beforehand, and think about what you want to do, what you're excited about doing, what this separated life can offer you. And start rebuilding a life for yourself step by step. It's a slow process. I see it as like a little bit of a wall being built, like little bricks. We layer them, we can rearrange them the way we want to. It doesn't have to be in a certain pattern, but we actually have an opportunity to recreate. And it's about prioritizing ourselves, redefining ourselves with new routines, with new hobbies, with new passions, things that may have been lost due to the relationship. I think an important thing is to really have boundaries, especially when it comes to our ex-partners. Make sure that you are very clear on what is okay and what isn't okay, what's acceptable to you. And with new partners, know what you're not prepared to tolerate in a new relationship. And I think that's a really important one moving forward, because when you're clear on what you don't want, your red flags will be high and bright and shine. But stay gentle. Be kind to yourself. It's like being reborn in a way at a mature age. And be grateful. Be grateful that you have this opportunity, because, one of the things that negates negative feelings is gratitude. So if we can acknowledge the things we're grateful for, our brain actually rewires and our neural pathways start heading towards a much more positive way of being in the world. And we don't get stuck in the negativity of it. We actually can start to see the positives that come out of a separation. So be grateful, have a little gratitude journal, start journaling. Some people have never journaled. Encourage that kind of journaling or that kind of self-reflection so that we can continue to learn and grow and find new things about ourselves which we never knew were there, that were dormant for many years. Music's another beautiful one. Music feeds the soul. Do things that feed your soul.
And be present with self is what I'm hearing you say. Come back to really tune into yourself. It's new opportunities to explore instead of drowning in guilt and sorrow and blame, which probably don't move us closer to where we want to go. And talking about the future, do you have any insights on finding love again? Now, some people will say, I never want to remarry, or I don't even want a long-term partner. Others will be looking for love very quickly. Some will welcome a solo life with, perhaps, there's so many ways to skin the cat here. Do you have any insights around next steps in the relational journey, whatever that might look like, depending on one's desires?
I can speak for myself. When I got divorced, I was never going to be in another relationship again. I was the eternal independent solo woman. Anyway, I decided that this was my time to heal, and I did a lot of work on myself. And 4 years later, I met the most lovely man, and we've been together for 14 years now, just going on 14 years, and in a beautiful relationship. So I think it's quite common to have these fixed, defined ideas initially, but be gentle on yourself again. Things change. The landscape always changes. Nothing stays the same. When I got divorced, I had very young kids. My kids are now graduated and in full-time jobs and relationships. Things don't stay the same. It's about just playing around with it. Be a little bit fluid, be curious at possibility. There are so many ways now to try and meet people, which, I never entertained. And to me, feel a little bit scary going online, dating groups. That's not anything I did, but there are people out there who do find relationships in that way. I'm a bit cautious of it, and I tell people to be cautious. But I think the secret is do the work first, heal, recognize what may have broken down in the marriage and why. That way you're more inclined to attract someone who's more aligned with you and your values.
And particularly who's more aligned with you and your values now, because you're different after however long. How long were you married?
I was together for about 13 years. We were married for about 10 years.
Yeah. So you're not that same person that you were then?
No.
Yeah.
No, I'm the same person, but I think I'm just much more.
In a good way, I can hear that. I can hear that. So just before we wrap up, what's a question you wish that everyone would ask perhaps themselves is the most important question here? What's the most important question I can ask me if I'm exploring separation?
Yeah, I think a really important question is to ask yourself why. Why are you separating? And to understand and to maybe say, if I do separate, what will my life look like in 5 years' time? And if I don't separate, what will my life look like in 5 years' time? And I think it's really just getting clear on what is important to us and knowing why we're doing what we're doing, and then reaching out and getting the support you need. And I can only agree with you. I think the separation guide is unbelievable in terms of just knowing which way to go. You know, some people even come and see me and I say, before we move forward, I would recommend you go into the separation guide and just, you know, be triaged, because sometimes people just don't even know which direction to go in.
No, and how would we?
Absolutely. So as much support as possible and the right support.
I was going to ask my final question around, and it's kind of similar to what you've just shared, but if you could give one piece of advice. So people are listening, let's imagine to our listeners who are thinking, I think this is me, this has really spoken to me, and a lot of what Bev's shared resonates. What can I do next? What's the one piece of advice you've got for next steps?
I think be clear, get clarity around your relationship, whether you want to go or you want to stay. And I think try everything in your power to make it work, because that way you will have no regret. So if you know that you've done everything you can to make the marriage or the relationship work, when you do leave, you will leave with less regret and you will leave knowing that you've tried everything you can.
Thank you so much, Bev. You've got a lovely way about you. It's gentle, it's clear, it's compassionate, but it's also hopeful. That's what I've taken from our conversation. I hope our listeners do the same. We're really grateful for your time.
Thanks, Sabina.
At the Separation Guide, we measure our success by our ability to keep you out of conflict and get through separation in the best possible way, protecting your long-term health, wealth, and happiness. The Separation Guide plan provides you with step-by-step guidance on all stages of separation and aims to empower you with the knowledge, expert resources, skills, and strategies to take each step with confidence. Every specialist attached to our platform is measured on their ability to do the same, and everyone signs an ethical charter showing we all believe that court should be seen as a last resort. If you'd like to learn more about your options in separation, or you want to be put in touch with professionals to guide you through, please go to theseparationguide.com.au and complete our 3-minute interactive Q&A, or check out our other podcasts and blogs. If you found the information today useful, please subscribe, share, and leave us a review. It's a great way to help our podcast reach others going through separation. In the spirit of reconciliation, the Separation Guide acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today.